Okay, good afternoon. Megillat Esther Part 1. B'Shem Hashem Naaseh V'Natzliach. This shiur is dedicated Le'ilui Nishmat Yechezkel Baruch ben Avram Halevi and all those were murdered prior, on, and post October 7, and Hanania ben Reuven. And Refuah Shlema to Zechariah ben Pershira, Chaya Esther bat Nechama, Tova bat Tzipora, Mazal bat Goltej, Sultanat, and Avraham ben Chana. Zivug Hagun, may all our singles find their partner in life. שיזכו לבנות בית נאמן בישראל בקדושה ובטהרה. And for the hatzlacha, for the success of our children, the education of our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren in Torah. So, Megillat Esther, Part 1. Megillat Esther starts with the word Vayehi biyemei Achashverosh. And Chachamim explained to us Vayehi, Vai, it's like Oi. Vai is the word milah lashon tsar. It's a term of when we want to express anxiety, suffering, because something is happening, something bad. So Vayehi is already telling us, oh, something not so great is going to happen. There's going to be some danger. There's going to be suffering. Not on a personal level, but on the national level. And then Chachamim explained to us that Vehaya is a Lashon Simcha. Whenever we have Vehaya, it means that it's going to be whatever we're going to be reading about or learning about is something that's going to bring good news. So in the Tanakh, 5 times it says Vayehi biyemeh, and it was in the days of. That means not such great news, right? And 4 other times it says Vayehi bayamim hahem, and it was in those days. So I'm only going to go through the times that where it says Vayehi bimeh. So the first one we see this term is in the time of Abraham, when Lot was taken as a prisoner of war, and Abraham had to go to war to save him, to save Lot. So that was Vayehi bimei Amrafel. That was in the days of Amrachel, who was the king. Then the second time we learn Vayehi bimei is during the time of Yeshaya Hanavi, where it says Vayehi bimei, and was in the days of Achaz ben Yotam ben Uziyahu melech Yehuda, in the days of Achaz, the son of Yotam, the son of Uziyahu melech Yehuda, the king of Yehuda. Because after Shlomo HaMelech passed away, the Eretz Israel was divided into 2 sections, and each section had a king. There was Melech Yehuda, the king of Yehuda, who was the king over the tribe of Yehuda, the tribe of Binyamin, some of the tribe of Shimon, and anyone else who wanted to join and be under the rule of the king of Yehuda. And then the other 10 tribes were under a different king, under the rule of a different king. So in the days of Achaz, the king of Aram, together with the king of Pekach ben Ramiliahu, both of them, Ramaliahu, he was a Jewish king, the king of Israel. So both of them, they wanted to get together and come to fight against the king Achaz. except against Yerushalayim, except they were not able to capture Yerushalayim. The next time we see again Vayehi Bimeh is in the Navi Yirmiyahu, and it says that during the reign of Yehoiakim ben Yosheyahu, the king of Yehuda, that's when the Galut of Yerushalayim started, that the Jews were sent out of Eretz Israel. Vayehi bimeh again, we see in Megillat Ruth, Vayehi bimeh shefot hashoftim, when the judges were being judged. And then Vayehi bimeh Achashverosh, that's how our Megillah starts, Megillat Esther, Vayehi bimeh of Achashverosh, during the time of Achashverosh, and then we have the story of Purim. So the question is, why is it that Vayehi bimeh is lashon tsar? Means that is a term used to warn us about some danger, about something going to happen. It's going to happen that's not so great, not so good, right? So the Maharal brings two explanations actually, and he says like this: Vayehi bimeh is because at the times of danger, days seem longer. It looks like the clock is stuck. The hour doesn't move. The minutes don't move. We don't see the end of the suffering. We don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. We count the hours, we count the days, we count the minutes. On the other hand, at the times of simcha, time seems to fly. And we don't realize, where did time go? How fast it went, right? And the second explanation is at the time of war and danger, each moment that passes becomes one more hour of survival, becomes important because it means that maybe there's survival, maybe we can survive. We don't know if we're going to survive. We don't know if we're going to survive the hour. We don't know if we're going to survive the day or the night. But we feel that, and we feel that every hour is like our last hour or our last day. So the term Vayehi bimeh is used for us to feel that moment of danger. So the Megillah starts from Vayehi bimeh for us to feel that the Jews were in real danger. We need to feel that, not just read it like you read a story. So now let's look at the historical background that surrounded the story of Purim. Who destroyed the Bet HaMikdash? The first one, that was Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel. He was the king of Bavel for 45 years. He was a very cruel king, very powerful, and at the end of his days, actually it was his son who killed him. His son, Evil Merodach, became the king, and he was the king for 23 years. After him came the son of Evil Merodach, Belshazzar. So all these three kings, Nebuchadnezzar, Evil Merodach, and Belshazzar, they were all three kings of Babel, and they were all bad kings. It had been 2 years that Belshazzar was the king. And then there was a war. But I will speak about the war a little later. I need to explain something first before I can talk about the war. The war. There were 2 kings, Daryavesh and Koresh. These kings were the king of Paras and Madai. Two countries, powerful kings, and friends. And already Belshazzar heard that they were coming against him to fight a war. And he also knew, Belshazzar knew, that there was a prophecy, a nevuah, from Yirmiyahu, that at the end of the 70 years, the second Bet HaMikdash was going to be built. 70 years of what? 70 years started from the time the Bet HaMikdash, the first Bet HaMikdash, was destroyed. However, no one was sure actually when the count of those 70 years started. Therefore, they didn't know when they were going to end. And Belshazzar knew this. So Belshazzar says, okay, nothing happened. A long time passed. My grandfather destroyed the Bet HaMikdash, the first Bet HaMikdash. Nothing happened. That means that my God has won over Hashem, right? And he decided to make a feast, but not just a regular feast. This this feast that he made was really to honor his God, his Avodah Zarah. Because in his mind, his God had won over Hashem. He's the king, and the Bet HaMikdash has not been built. The second Bet HaMikdash has not been built. So, for sure, that's it. It's not going to happen. So his Avodah Zarah won over Hashem. Not only that he wanted to honor his Avodah Zarah, but he also wanted to show how his Avodah Zarah had actually won over Hashem, that he ordered that all the kelim of Kedusha, of the Bet HaMikdash, that only the Kohanim were allowed to use, and some only the Kohen Gadol was allowed to use, that he was going to have them brought, and he was going to use them in this feast to honor his God. And he invited all his advisors and his wise men and his generals. And you can imagine what kind of a feast that was. In the middle of the celebration, suddenly there was a hand that came from nowhere. And that hand started to write on the wall. Everyone was scared. The king was shaking of fear. What does this mean? What is this writing? What is this hand? Where did it come from? What's the meaning of this writing on the wall? And he asked, and he promised a huge reward. Whoever will explain to me what is this on the wall, I'll give him gold. I will give and I will give and I will give. Except none of his generals, none of his wise men, none of his advisors were able to explain to Belshazzar the writing on the wall. And then his grandmother came, and she said, in the days of your grandfather Nebuchadnezzar, there was an advisor that Nebuchadnezzar, a Jewish advisor, that Nebuchadnezzar had made him the top of his ministers. And Nebuchadnezzar loved him very much. And he appreciated very much this Jewish advisor by the name of Daniel. The spirit of Hashem is on him, and he has a lot of chokhmah. He is the one who can explain this writing on the wall. So quickly said, okay, where is he? Go, get him for me. And send people looking for him. And they brought him in Daniel. The first thing that Belshazzar said, I will give you gold and this and this and this. He said, I don't need a reward. But I will explain to you what is writing on the board, on the wall. What the meaning? What is the meaning of this writing on the wall? And Daniel said, and he explained, and he said, Hashem had given to your grandfather Nebuchadnezzar a lot of power. He was very powerful. All nations were afraid of him. Whoever heard his name was scared, feared for his life. However, he was very cruel and he became full of himself. To punish him, Hashem had turned him into an animal that he actually had to crawl on four and live in the forest for 7 years. All the descriptions, all the details of this is all in Sefer Daniel in chapters 4 and 5. And at the end, his son, Evil Merodach, killed him, your father. And you, Belshazzar, you should have known better. You knew and you know. Not only that you know, you still know about this. You should have learned a lesson from it. But you became full of yourself and you thought that you could win with your idols against Hashem. And you took out the kelim, the keli kodesh of the Bet HaMikdash to use them for your avodah zarah, for your idols. Now this hand came from heaven, and it's a warning. And it says, the hand wrote, Mene, mene, takel, ufarsin. Mene, mene means counting. Counting, it's counting and it's finished. What is finished? The end of the days of Bavel have come. That means Hashem has looked into your deeds. You have done terrible things. You, your grandfather, your father, your grandfather, you all have done terrible things. You didn't do any deed that was good. Therefore, your kingdom is going to be split into two. It's going to be won over by the king of Paras and the king of Madai. Now, let's stop here about Belshazzar. We'll come back in a moment. I want to talk about the king of Madai and Paras. At that time, Koresh, he was the king of Madai. He wanted to marry the daughter of the king of Paras, which is Dariavesh. So, sorry, Koresh. Koresh was the king of Paras, and Dariavesh was the king of Madai. And so Dariavesh asked Koresh, I would like to marry your daughter. Koresh was very happy. The king of Madai was his friend. He was very happy that his daughter, he wanted to become his son-in-law. And they agreed. And they also made another agreement. Koresh said that the agreement was that when Dariavesh, the king of Paras, would die, Koresh would become the king over Paras and Madai. And then they said, okay, it's time for us to capture Bavel. And they got together, two armies to come and fight Bavel against Belshazzar. However, before going to war, Dariavesh prayed to Hashem. Why? How did he pray to Hashem? Like, what made him pray to Hashem? We're going to learn that in a moment. But he prayed to Hashem and he said like this, Hashem, if you help me in this war and I destroy Belshazzar and I capture Bavel, when I come back from war, I will give permission to the Jews to build the second Bet HaMikdash. I will make it possible for them to build the second Bet HaMikdash. So now let's come back to Belshazzar. So now Belshazzar heard the message from Daniel, and he heard about the war, and that the end of Babel is coming, but he still thinks that his idol is going to help. So what does he do? He gets his soldiers to surround the palace, to fortify the palace. And he even brings in more soldiers to make sure that no one can come into the palace. And he gives an order. No one is allowed in the palace. No one. Even if they tell you he's the king, you don't. No one comes in. No one comes into the palace, no matter what. Okay? And if anyone tries, you're supposed to kill that person right away. No question asked. And now we see Hashgacha Pratit. There is nothing that can be done against Hashem. Belshazzar. Why? Why am I saying this? Chachamim, not me. Why are Chachamim saying this? Belshazzar suddenly had terrible stomach aches, terrible stomach cramps. So he had to use the facilities, restroom in the palace. It wasn't enough. And because it was so bad, he actually left the palace to go outside and relieve himself. Okay, he was done. Then he tried coming in. Oh, but what did he say? Is anyone allowed into the palace? So when he asked the God, I want to go in, the God said no. And what did the God do? He killed him. Even though he said, I am the king, he didn't believe him, and he killed him. From that moment on, there's no king inside, so there was confusion. Once there's confusion, then nobody knows what to do. And that's how the armies of Koresh and Daryavesh were able to come into the palace. At the time, and they won the war. At the time, Vashti, she was 12 years old at the time. She was sleeping, but she heard the screaming, the fighting, and she got up. But all she saw was just people fighting. So she tried running this way, that way, and she figured, I'll go to the throne and I'll hide under the throne, and that's what she did. But thinking that her father was sitting on the throne, but she didn't realize that whoever was sitting on the throne was not her father. Whoever was sitting on the throne was Daryavish. She came out, she looked up, and she realized, oh, this is not my father. And she begged, please save me. And so Daryavish felt sorry for her, for this little girl, and he gave an order, do not kill her, and he took her with him to Paras. 6 years later, Vashti married Achashverosh. Now we're going to go back to Daryavesh. Daryavesh was the king of Paras. He had an advisor by the name of Zerubbabel ben Shaltiel, and some say that he was Ezra HaSofer, who was a big Talmid Chacham, a big tzaddik, and the king loved him very, very much. He would talk to him, have all kind of discussions with him. He loved his wit, his wisdom. And whatever advice he got from Zerubbabel, he realized these were really solid, good advice. And so one day, when Dariavesh was relaxed, he asked Zerubbabel, he asked him, is there anything? Is there a wish that you have that you would like me to fulfill? I'll do it for you. And Zerubbabel said, remember you promise you made to Hashem? Because that's how Dariavesh knew about Hashem. Do you remember? You said if you win the war against Bavel, you will allow the Jews to build the second Bet HaMikdash. So you won the war. Now you're back home. You killed Bashatzar. There's no more Bavel. You won, but your promise has not been fulfilled yet. And Dariavesh realized his mistake and he says, I will take care of it right away. And so he called his son Koresh. And he made him the king right during his lifetime. Made him the king, the only king of Paras and Madai. And he told him, you are going to oversee the building of the second Bet HaMikdash. And start right away. And Koresh did. Right away, they announced to the Jews, you are allowed to go back to Yerushalayim, to Eretz Israel, and to start building the Bet HaMikdash. Even Zerubbabel, Ezra, was allowed to go to Yerushalayim to start to build the Bet HaMikdash. There was a lot of work before they could even start building the Bet HaMikdash. The country had been destroyed completely. However, Dariavesh died. Sometimes later, Koresh, who did not have any children, also died. And now the country didn't have an heir who was going to be the next king. And so the wise men and the advisors, they said, okay, we will choose a king, the person who is the wealthiest, the richest, will become the next king. Since the king didn't have any relative, any children, any heir. And so that's what they did. They announced the richest, the wealthiest man will be the next king. So who was the wealthiest man in Parasamadai? That was Achashverosh. How did Achashverosh become so wealthy? So the story goes like this. Chachamim explained to us that when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Yerushalayim, he had hidden 1,800 treasures of the Bet HaMikdash. The Bet HaMikdash was full of gold. And so Nebuchadnezzar had stolen all the gold, 1,800 treasures. But Nebuchadnezzar did not want his son to get his hands on that treasure. So what did he do? He hid the treasures. So Evil Merodach never found them, never found those treasures. Bashatzar never found the treasures. But who found them? Achashverosh. Achashverosh found the treasures. And so he was the wealthiest man in the entire nation, in the entire kingdom of Paras and Madai. He was not of royal blood. So what did he do to secure his throne? He married Vashti. He married Vashti 6 years after Vashti was brought to Paras. He married Vashti, even though she was from Bavel, right? So he married her because she was a real princess. And the construction of Eretz Israel, of the Bet HaMikdash, was still going on its way. They were still busy constructing and building. And Vashti heard about it. And she came to Ahasuerus full of anger. And she said, how dare you give permission to the Jews to build the second Bet HaMikdash when my grandfather Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it? And my great-grandfather, sorry, and my father and my grandfather made sure it was not rebuilt. And you give permission to the Jews to rebuild the second Bet HaMikdash? So sure enough, Ahasuerus ordered that the construction should be stopped. And that's it. After he consulted his 7 advisors, and one of the 7 advisors was Memuchan. Who was Memuchan? Haman, to stop the building of the Bet HaMikdash. This was such a disappointment for the Jews. All their dreams were shattered. And therefore the Megillah starts, Vayehi bimei Achashverosh, the disappointment, the suffering. The Jews were walking around crying, Vai, vai, oi. They were depressed. They were crying. However, the son of Achashverosh, Dariavesh number 2, who is also the son of Esther, according to some opinions, he did allow the Jews to build the second Bet HaMikdash after the 70 years. At the end of the Megillah, there is a song that we sing, Vegam, we say Baruch Mordechai, Baruch Esther, and Zachor Latov, that should be remembered well, Vegam Charbona, Zachor Latov. And also Charbona should be remembered well. Why does it say Vegam? Should say Vecharbona, without the gam, without the also. So in the Gemara, Megillah Tetzain, it says like this: Af charbona rasha haya, ki haya be'ota etza. Says in the Gemara that Charbona, he too was a rasha. He too was part of the plot with Haman to kill the Jews. He too wanted to hang Mordechai on the gallows. So what do we say then, Zachor Latov? That he should be remembered well. How come? So the Maggid of Dubna says like this. He brings a mashal, a parable, and he says, there was a blind man, and this blind man, he was poor. And he had a young boy who would walk with him and guide him and take him, and he would take him places. This way he was able to ask for tzedakah from people, from passers-by. And then one day, suddenly the poor man starts crying. He realized that his purse was empty. He says, where is my money? Where's my money? My money is missing. Where is it? And he was crying. He was really, really crying so much. Where's my money? Where's my money? He was desperate. Oi, my money, where is it? I have no money now. Don't even have not even one coin. Where is my money? And he was really, you could see that the cry was from the bottom of his heart. The young boy who was guiding him really felt bad. And he said, here, I found your 20 coins. All your money, I found it. So the blind man, instead of saying thank you to the young boy, with his cane, he started to hit the young boy real hard. And the child started to scream and cry from pain. What are you doing? I'm helping you. I found you money. Instead of saying thank you, this is how you pay me back. Why? Here's your money. And so the blind man said, you didn't find my money. You stole my money. Otherwise, if you had not stolen my money, how come you knew that I had 20 coins? I never said I had 20 coins. You said. It means that you stole my money from my purse. And so the Nimshal, the answer to the parable is, what does this mean? Chavona had said to Achashverosh, here is the gallows. The gallows that is 50 amma high, that Haman prepared for Mordechai. So right away, the Gemara asks the question, 50 amma high? How do you know it's 50 amma high? Okay, you saw the gallows, because the gallows was very, very high, the highest thing in Shushan. How do you know? But how do you know? Because you helped build it for Mordechai, right? So how come at the end we do say Zachor Latov about Charbona? Because at that moment, Charbona realized he was, I would say, an opportunist. He realized, oh, the king is upset, then this gallows better be for Haman and not for Mordechai. Because the king is upset with Haman, not with Mordechai. The king is so angry and he wants to kill Haman. So it has to be that this gallows is going to be for Haman and not for Mordechai. So at the end, really, it ended up being that since the suggestion by Charbonat to hang Haman in the gallows, right, and the king followed with that suggestion, that saved the Jews. And so at that moment, that split second, that Charbonat changed his thought of thinking, his way of thinking, right? That shows how things can turn around. And if we have done wrong, just as Charbonat had done, we can, in a split second, we can turn that and turn into something good and be forgiven. So may these days of Purim be days of happiness, days of light of Torah. And just as by Yamim Hahem, in those days of Mordechai and Esther, Hashem had made miracles, so too Hashem should make also miracles for us, Bazman Hazeh, in our days. History repeats itself, and it is repeating itself again. But Be'ezrat Hashem, Hashem will help us and pull us through. Layehudim hayta ora v'simcha, ken tihye lanu.